Welcome back, students. We are in video 3 of 3 of modular 12, older adults, needs and services. And we are going to continue to move forward through the rest of the PowerPoint slides. And one of the first things that we're going to spend some time is talking about Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is something that has become something that we've been more aware of, I would say, over the last 30 to 40 years. And while we previously probably saw it, in fact, we know we did see it, we didn't really have a name for it. And so it's only been in recent years has Alzheimer's disease been something that we've identified by specific um, symptoms and disease process. So Alzheimer's disease is a degenerative disease of the central nervous system characterized by premature mental deterioration. Alzheimer's disease is an irreversible, progressive brain disease that slowly destroys memory and thinking skills, and eventually even the ability to carry out the simplest tasks of daily living. Once considered a rare disorder, it's now seen as a major public health problem affecting millions of older adults and their families. And the federal government's lead agency for Alzheimer's disease is the National Institute on Aging, which is a part of the US Department of Health and Human Services. So, not that it's necessary for you to know this, but there's some really valuable and interesting videos on places like YouTube that really give you sort of an understanding about what is actually medically happening or physically happening in the brain when a person experiences Alzheimer's disease. But it's the idea that your central nervous system begins to just not function as it had in the past. It's irreversible, meaning that it's once it starts, you're not going to improve and get better. It's progressive. Over time, it's just going to get worse. It destroys memory and thinking skills, and eventually, even the ability to carry out the simplest tasks of daily living. At the very end stage of Alzheimer's disease, the body, the brain, the central nervous system does not know how to modulate breathing any longer. And so the person literally stops breathing because their brain does not provide them with what they need in order to be able to breathe. So people die from Alzheimer's disease. In most people with Alzheimer's, symptoms may first appear around age 60. It's the most common cause of dementia among older people. So by dementia, we mean that cognitive disorder, not knowing how to do things that you used to know how to do, loss of memory, not recognizing people anymore, those kinds of things. Um, so Parkinson's is another disease that can happen that may result in dementia. Um, there can be side effects from stroke that may cause dementia as well. So those are some of the other diseases that may result in people experiencing dementia. It's a slow disease that progresses in basically 3 stages. There's an early preclinical stage where there are no symptoms. Quite frankly, most people wouldn't know that they have Alzheimer's if they were in this stage. A middle stage of mild cognitive impairment, and a final stage of Alzheimer's dementia. The time from diagnosis to death varies. It can be as little as 3 to 4 years if the person is older than 80 when they were diagnosed, as to as long as 10 or more years if the person is younger at the time of diagnosis. So I think it's just important to recognize the fact that one of the challenges with Alzheimer's disease is that it's a disease of ruling other things out. So, as a patient or a client begins to demonstrate obvious signs that may be attributed to Alzheimer's, it's an issue of running clinical and diagnostic tests to determine that there can't be another reason that it's happening. So in other words, there's not a test to go in and draw blood and run a test and say, oh, it's Alzheimer's. What it is you work with the patient and you find out, no, they didn't have a stroke. No, they don't have Parkinson's. No, they're not on a medication that could be causing these kinds of effects. You kind of rule out all these other things. And if you can't attribute the cognitive uh, dysfunction to any other cause, then you call it Alzheimer's. Quite frankly, the only way to definitively diagnose Alzheimer's is by doing a biopsy of the brain. So the only time when a person is finally officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's is at autopsy. So they can go in and uh, do a brain, do a biopsy of the brain, and they're able to identify that Alzheimer's was involved or was the cause of death. Um, so another consideration for social workers in terms of older adults is the issue of abuse, elder abuse, or elder neglect. So just as we talked in the past in terms of child abuse and child neglect, there's kind of these two different definitions where abuse is something that's often very deliberate and often involves a variety of different either physical, mental, sexual abuse, while neglect is simply something where people are not being cared for the way that they should be, and it's having an impact on their health or their social well-being. So elder abuse is defined as any intentional or negligent act by a caregiver or any other person that causes harm or poses a serious risk of harm to a vulnerable older adult. Um, One of the things that's most interesting is that self-neglect is perhaps the most common form of neglect. So this is something where an older adult has reached a point in their life where they're no longer able to care for themselves effectively on their own by themselves. So you start to see things like they're not eating regularly, they're not taking good care of their hygiene, they're not able to take their medications on a regular basis. So those would all be examples of self-neglect. It's not that somebody is doing something to them or somebody is necessarily deliberately neglecting them. It's simply because of the situation that they find themselves in where they're living alone, that they're neglecting themselves, and it's having an impact on their health and well-being. Abuse usually occurs when the older adult is living with a relative or a care provider. Adult protective services are designed to shield older adults from harm. So, domestic elder abuse, this is the mistreatment committed by someone with whom the elder has a special relationship. So, for instance, it could be a spouse, a sibling, a child, a friend, or a caregiver. And then you have what's called institutional abuse, which is a mistreatment that's occurring in a residential facility. Institutional abuse is usually perpetrated by someone with a legal or contractual obligation to provide some element of care or protection. So this could be a care provider, it could be a healthcare provider, it could be an employee, a staff person within a residential facility that is abusing the elder. So this is all the different types of abuse that has been identified and characterized or categorized. Physical abuse, inflicting, and this is important, or threatening to inflict physical pain or injury on a vulnerable elder or depriving them of a basic need. And in most states, elder is defined as someone older than 65. Emotional abuse. This is inflicting mental pain, anguish, or distress on an elder person through verbal or nonverbal acts. Very common in terms of emotional abuse. If you don't stop doing that, I'm going to put you in a home, something like that. So trying to control a person's behavior by threatening to, put them in a facility where they are going to experience even less power or control over their lives. Sexual abuse, so non-consensual sexual contact of any kind, coercing an elder to witness sexual behaviors is another one. So, if an older adult cannot consent to sexual contact, and you have to take into consideration whether somebody's experiencing cognitive disabilities, so they're not mentally able to provide consent, or it's simply straight out rape, meaning that they could consent, they are not giving consent, they're being coerced, or they're being coerced to witness sexual behaviors, is another form of sexual abuse. Exploitation, taking, misusing, or concealment of funds, property, or assets of a vulnerable elder. So exploitation is, again, it's often about money, it's often about property, it's often about taking valuables or assets away from a person without having the permission of the elder adult to be able to utilize those resources. Neglect, refusal or failure by those responsible to provide food, shelter, healthcare, or protection for a vulnerable elder. And then abandonment. This is the desertion of a vulnerable elder by anyone who's assumed the responsibility for care or custody of that particular person. So simply walking away, simply, if you're the designated care provider, but, you leave and go away for a week and nobody is there to care for the older adult, that would be considered abandonment. So we talked a little bit about self-neglect, but here's a little bit more information on that. So sometimes elders neglect their own care, leads to illness or injury. This can include things like hoarding of objects, or other household or community, I'm sorry, hoarding of objects is threatening or compromised. Failure to provide adequate food or nutrition for oneself, we talked about that. Failure to take medications, leaving a burning stove unattended, poor hygiene, not wearing suitable clothes for the weather, confusion, inability to attend to housekeeping, dehydration. Self-neglect is the most common type of maltreatment of older adults. So that's the thing that's so interesting about self-neglect, is that if you're living on your own and somebody is infrequently checking in on you, just occasionally going in once a week or something like that. Hi, just checking in. How you doing? Okay, bye. 5 minutes once a week. Are they going to witness dehydration? Are they going to witness how dirty the house is? Are they going to be aware the fact that you're walking out into freezing weather and you don't have a coat? That you've left the stove on, 6 times in the last 2 weeks or something like. So all these kinds of things can easily be overlooked simply because of the nature of, you've got an older adult living on their own, somebody not regularly checking in on them, monitoring their care. So so then talking about long-term care, people relocating from their home into an assisted living facility or a nursing home. Only 5% of older Americans experience health problems that actually require them to move into a long-term care facility. Primary reason for alternatives to nursing home care, such as home health care, visiting nurses, personal care homes. We provide all these services so that people can stay in their homes safely for a longer period of time. Third-party payments to healthcare providers spawned a long-term care industry. So because there was money to be made through nursing home care, nursing homes grew. Majority of long-term care facilities are private, profit-making businesses. And one piece of federal legislation, the Ombudsman Budget Reconciliation Act, requires that nursing homes have to be regularly evaluated. They have certain reforms that were implemented. They increase the rights of the residents. They have to have written care plans, training for staff, and the employment of certified social workers. All of those came about as a result of that particular piece of legislation. So In terms of these alternative care facilities or alternative living facilities, nursing homes is one example. It's one of several options for senior living. Um, the nursing home may be decided upon for an individual if it's determined that the individual requires round the clock nursing care or is experiencing significant challenges with the activities of daily living, or ADLs. So ADLs, these are a set of daily activities that a person would expect to conduct every single day. And what you find is you can measure whether a person is successfully able to complete all of their ADLs. So are they able to provide a meal? Are they able to cook a meal? Are they able to bathe themselves? Are they able to dress themselves? Are they able to take their medications? Those would be all considered ADLs. And one of the sort of thresholds or measurements that you would do in terms of deciding whether an individual might be a good candidate for a nursing home is, how are they doing on their ADLs? Are they missing medications? Are they unable to dress themselves? Are they unable to do hygiene for themselves? Are they unable to prepare a meal for themselves? If those are all things that they're lacking in, then they're lacking in meeting those ADLs, and that might be a good reason for a nursing home to be considered. Nursing homes can also be identified as skilled nursing facilities, what's called SNFs, senior care centers, rest homes, or rehabilitation centers. Often rehabilitation is encouraged for those patients who are intending to return to their home and or to an assisted living facilities where they've resided at before. So a lot of times a nursing home is not sort of a permanent situation for an older adult. Maybe somebody fell, they broke a hip, they're now recovering. They go into a nursing home for 6 weeks to 12 weeks. They get better. Now they can go back home or back to wherever they were residing before they broke their hip. So nursing homes are not always a permanent solution, but they're often a rehabilitative piece. Housing for seniors, often seniors may find themselves in substandard housing. Substandard housing among the elderly exceeds those for other age groups. Often this could be the result of having lived in a home for years and years and years, decades, and maybe maybe for many, many years they were able to maintain their housing. They were able to do everything that they could to make sure that their housing was in good shape. But maybe over the last 20 years, their physical limitations have resulted in them not being able to do as much as they've done in the past. So as a result, now their house is considered unsafe or substandard. Government housing for the aging is difficult to secure. There's not enough. Housing alternatives for more economically secured age are needed. And then you have what's called gentrification, which is the restoration and upgrading of deteriorating urban properties by middle class or affluent people, which often results in displacement of low-income people. And those could be low-income, older adult, senior people. So we talked about the fact that the older adult population is growing. It's also becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. So the authors talk about that, again, as the aging population grows, we're going to see more older adults who are people of color as well. In 2010, 80% of adults aged 65 years or older in the United States were non-Hispanic whites. By 2030, that percentage will have declined. Older non-Hispanic white adults will make up only 71.2% of the population, whereas Hispanics will make up 12%. Non-Hispanic Blacks nearly 10.3, and Asians 5.4. So again, it's important to think about as we begin to think about what is the world going to look like as we have a larger population of older adults. The other thing to think about is, what is the world going to look like when we see a larger percentage of older adults who are also people of color. 2050, racial ethnic diversity of older US adults will change even more profoundly. Non or older non-Hispanic white adults will account for only 58% of the total population. The proportion of older Hispanics will almost triple from 7% in 2010 to nearly 20% in 2050. The proportion of older Asian Americans will more than double, 3.3 to 8.5, and African Americans will increase from 8.3 to 11.2. Unfortunately, for older adults of color, life expectancy is shorter, and the percentage of the elderly living below the poverty line is higher. Um, Percentages are dramatically higher for households headed by women. Health status of people of color, including American Indian, Alaskan Native, Native Hawaiians, other Pacific Islanders, all of these populations have lagged behind that of non-Hispanic whites in terms of health status. So for a variety of reasons, older adults may be impacted more about health disparities than younger people of color. Issues including language barriers, reduced access to healthcare, low socioeconomic status, differing culture norms can be major challenges to promoting health in an increasingly diverse older population. So as people find themselves with less mobility, things like telemedicine might be, a really important part, but we know that sometimes older adults are more challenged with technology. So do people know how to telemedicine with their doctor on their cell phone or on their laptop computer? What if there are still language barriers that people are experiencing? What if they don't have adequate transportation to be able to get to healthcare? Um, what if they don't have health insurance? Hopefully, they've been able to sign up for Medicare and Medi-Cal. And again, differing cultural norms that can be a challenge in people accessing healthcare. So, services for older adults, overwhelmingly, the magnitude of need is great due to the size of the population, the diversity of the population, and due to ongoing issues around discrimination. Ageism, let's define that. That's discrimination against the elderly because of their age. So, just as we've got sexism, we also have ageism. The availability of services vary across communities, particularly for older adults. Budget cuts have adversely affected the availability of services, and the needs certainly outweigh the availability of services. So, social workers who are working with older adults often are coming out of a generalist practice model. Working in the micro level is most common, so mostly working one on one with older adults. Many opportunities exist for creating a more responsive opportunity structure for the aged in the community level. And as their population grows, obviously their political power is going to grow. So you have to believe that there will be more services that should become available simply because the number of individuals, and particularly maybe the number of individuals who are voters, is going to increase um, as the population increases. So many schools of social work have established specializations in gerontology. This is the study of aging and the aging process specifically in relationship to social work. So if you've ever thought that older adults was something that you'd be particularly interested in working in, there is this field called gerontology where, for instance, at Fresno State, there's a program where you get your degree in social work, but you specifically focus on a set of classes that are in the gerontology focus so that when you graduate, you get a degree in social work with a special emphasis on gerontology. So the US Bureau of Labor Statistics project an overall increase of 22% for social work jobs between 2006 and 2016, and that figure increases to 24% for medical and public health social workers and 30% for mental health and substance abuse social workers. So that was, again, up to 2016, that there was this really kind of bump in terms of the need and the number of jobs that were offered and available for social workers during that time. That concludes our PowerPoint. So, okay, hold on. I always get confused here. So I want to stop sharing this. Hi, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Want to go here. Be patient. Hold on. Almost there. Okay. So I hope what you're seeing is Canvas for Modular 12. I want to quickly take you through everything that's here. So here are our learning objectives. A lot of the things that that we've talked about in the PowerPoint are right here, and the unit introduction. And of course, always the PowerPoint presentation in terms of what you just viewed has not yet been uploaded to Canvas yet, but it will be there by the time you get there. Here is the PowerPoint on a Modular 12, Chapter 12. Here is a very short video on social work and aging. I thought this was interesting because it was actually produced by a group of students that are part of the Gerontology Student Association at Brown School of Social Work in St. Louis. This is a video that I've always appreciated. It gives you a great overview. One of the most significant mental health disorders that does occur in older adults is depression. And this really goes through and gives you a great overview of depression in older adults. This is a very short video that provides you with a lot of facts and figures about Alzheimer's disease in the United States. Here's your discussion board. So I'm asking you to address 3 questions. And it's all based on this particular video here. And I wanted to what I want you to do is when you get to the discussion board, the first thing you should do is click on the link here. And as the instructions say, please click on the link, go to Canopy and start the video from that site. So you're going to click on Canopy. And here's the video that I want you to watch. So you should be able to click here to play the video. And once you get it open, you'll be able to expand the screen and all of that. It's, I believe it's about 29 minutes long, I think. But it does give you an excellent overview in terms of aging in America. So let's see. Whoop, sorry. Too many things opened here. Okay. So after watching the video, again, you're going to draft your discussion board. You're going to draft your discussion board by restating each of the questions before you answer them. Question 1, describe your hopes and visions for your parents or another important older adult in your life for their future in terms of their quality of life. Additional points for references made to the film Aging in America: The Years Ahead. Question 2, what role will you play in ensuring that these hopes and visions for your parents or other older adults becomes a reality? Question 3, think of what you want your own experience to be for the way you want to live out your older adult years. What do you think will be important to you, and how do you see these yourself? For instance, where will you live? What will you be doing? Who will be important in your life? And again, additional points for references made to the film Aging in America: The Years Ahead. I'm asking for your responses to be posted by Saturday, November 21st. And as always, 2 replies to peers by Sunday, November 22nd. And then finally, here is the quiz for Modular 12. Okay. So be on the lookout for some additional information coming as part of announcements that are going to talk about how we're going to wrap up the semester. There's some extra credit opportunities coming up. I want to do a quick orientation on how to submit the final paper. So all of those things will be coming up in the announcement section. So please keep your eyes open for those things. In the meantime, I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we will talk soon.